Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Me pueden escuchar? Sí, perfecto. Disculpen ahí el detalle del audio, pero bienvenidos a todos a este evento que viene auspiciado por el capítulo de Ciudad de México de Action Design Network. Ahorita, digamos, voy a hacer una breve introducción. Vamos a tener al doctor Stephen Wendel platicándonos sobre qué es el diseño de cambio de comportamiento y un poquito sobre el segundo libro que está sacando ahorita a mercado. Es un libro muy bonito, justamente ahorita vamos a platicar de eso. Les digo, antes de darle la palabra a Stephen, les voy a contar un poquito nada más de qué se trata el Action Design Network y digamos cómo es que ustedes pueden ser parte de la red y acceder a este tipo de eventos de manera recurrente, ¿no? Action Design Network es una red de practitioners enfocados en aplicar ciencias del comportamiento al diseño de productos, de servicios y de soluciones, digamos, en el mundo real. Es una red muy bonita porque está muy enfocada a la parte práctica de esta disciplina tan bonita que es, o que son las ciencias del comportamiento, ¿no? Y lo padre de Action Design es que es una red global, ¿no? Al final del día, Action Design ya tiene capítulos en varias ciudades en el mundo, ¿no? De hecho, la mayoría de los capítulos están ubicados en Estados Unidos, en Canadá, hay algún capítulo en Australia y digamos que tenemos también el capítulo de Ciudad de México, que de cierta manera es pues un poco la expansión del grupo hacia Latinoamérica, ¿no? Entonces les digo, es bien interesante, la verdad es que los eventos a los que accede la red, ¿no? Pues justamente ahorita se están empezando a globalizar, ¿no? Con el tema de digital hay algunos eventos que vamos a empezar a tener de manera global y que permiten, ¿no? Que desde sus casas pues accedan a información, ideas, conceptos que han trabajado personas que están enfocadas en la práctica de esto en diferentes partes en el mundo. El capítulo de Ciudad de México tiene poco tiempo, ¿no? Empezamos al inicio del año. De hecho, por ahí de febrero estuvimos en el CIDE teniendo un taller en el que justamente Steve estuvo guiando a 28 personas, más o menos cerca de 30 personas en la aplicación de conceptos de las ciencias del comportamiento a la resolución de problemas. Les digo, es bien padre porque el objetivo completamente de la red es divulgar, crear, digamos, oportunidades de encuentro para que quienes están interesados en esto, como ustedes y nosotros que estamos aquí, pues tengamos la oportunidad de, por un lado, ¿no? Juntarnos y tener, pues, contacto entre nosotros y por otro lado, pues, tener acceso a figuras como Steve que nos va, digamos, a contar un poquito de conceptos y de un modelo muy padre que está incorporado en su libro, ¿no? Ahora, si les interesa formar parte de la red, hay formas distintas de hacerlo. Ahorita, digamos, el Action Design tiene muchos materiales disponibles. Al principio les poníamos ahí un pequeño código QR para que ustedes puedan ir al grupo de Meetup, ¿no? Tenemos un grupo de Meetup donde, digamos, si ustedes quieren estar al pendiente de los eventos que tenemos, ahí los pueden tener, pero también hay otros recursos del Action Design muy padres. Hay un podcast muy bonito, digamos, donde en ocasiones se entrevista a personajes como Rory Sutherland, a Steve Wendel, a otras personas que están directamente otra vez aplicando estos conceptos en la práctica. Hay una bolsa de trabajo, es decir, yo sé que este es un campo que ahorita está teniendo mucha atención, entonces si les interesa buscar la manera de integrar su carrera a esta disciplina, pues la bolsa de trabajo del Action Design les va a permitir un poquito saber cuál es la demanda de trabajo que hay tanto en Latinoamérica como el mundo. Y también hay un directorio de equipos, que es una parte muy importante, ¿no? Es decir, Steve con el equipo del Action Design, con la sociedad, el SB, do you remember the name of the other association with the Behavioral Teams Directory, Steve?
Sorry, the Behavioral Science Policy Association.
Right, the Behavioral Science and Policy Association. Entonces, digamos, lo padre que van a encontrar ahí es que es un survey mundial en donde se buscaron, digamos, mapear el 40% más o menos de los grupos que están trabajando con esto en el mundo. Entonces, si ustedes están en un grupo o si ustedes quieren, digamos, otra vez acercar su carrera a esta disciplina, el directorio de equipos les va a dejar ver más o menos qué tipo de empresas, en qué tipo de áreas se están enfocando y un poquito conocer cómo es que, digamos, las ciencias del comportamiento están desarrollándose en el mundo, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, ahorita le voy a ceder la palabra a Steve. Les digo, si les interesa estar al pendiente de los eventos, tomen una foto al código QR que está del lado izquierdo, donde vamos a estar nosotros subiendo, digamos, constantemente los eventos que se hagan con relación al EDN Ciudad de México. Entonces, bueno, con esto le cedo la palabra a Steve para una plática muy interesante. Steve.
Thanks, everybody. Gracias, Emiliano. As Emiliano said, I am Steve Wendel, and it's my apologies that it's better if I speak in English. Sería muy divertido para ti if I speak in español. Se habla en español, pero no será útil. So, lo siento. Es mejor en inglés. So, as Emiliano mentioned, I have been studying behavioral science for many years and did this the survey that he just mentioned. And I want to share some of the key lessons from that survey and from this research. Whether you're completely new to the field or whether it's something you've been doing for some time, I think there's a lot that all of us can learn from what's going on in the field right now. And so, in particular, there's a book that just came out. I will be sharing that summarized the results of this survey. And in particular, it summarizes the blueprint that we're seeing across companies across the world. That behavioral science applied behavioral science is really about 10, 15 years old. And over that time, we've come together to take a very common approach, a way that each of us, as we've explored and tried different things, have kind of settled on a common process. And that's what I want to share today. I'm going to share that blueprint of how we apply behavioral science. But I know that for many of you, this is very new. So I thought I'd start with an introduction to what behavioral science is before we dive into that blueprint. And because we're going to be talking about, well, helping people change behavior, use our products, exercise more, etc. I always want to talk about the ethical implications of this. Now, we do have time at the end for Q&A, but I encourage you to ask throughout. So there's a Q&A window. I'll be checking that. So please, if you have any questions, if I'm going too fast or for that matter too slow, please just tell me, and I'm happy to adapt. I love behavioral science, and I love the good that we can do in the field. And if you were to let me, I would talk for days on end about this. So please ask the questions that are relevant for you and will help you in your work, understand and apply, and do good in the field. And so let me start with this introduction to behavioral science. Many of you may have come across books like Nudge or Predictably Irrational that talk about the funny things that our minds do. I like to start just with a practical example. Now, this is one that is a huge problem in the US, but I find that everywhere else I've traveled around the world, it's often quite similar, which is many people, myself included, have a gym membership, or in this case, exercise equipment at home that we really intend to use, but that we don't quite follow through on. So we have the motivation, we have the desire, we believe we'll do it, because otherwise we wouldn't spend the money on the gym, or we wouldn't spend the money on the exercise equipment, or the running shoes, etc. But we just don't follow through. Now, as behavioral scientists, we call this an intention-action gap. So often in our lives, we may sincerely want to do something, but there's a huge gap. There's a difference between that and what we actually do. We see this, of course, in exercise. We see this in people taking medications that will save their lives. We see this in parents who want to spend more time with their kids, but they always get distracted and busy and doing something else. So behavioral science, in many ways, studies why that happens, why this gap happens between what people want to do and what they actually do. And this happens not only in these broad behaviors like exercise, but it happens in our products as well, where somebody might really want to use your new budgeting application. This is a budgeting application I'm showing on the screen. But, well, they get distracted or they get busy with something else. And the desire is there. They may, in a user testing session, they may look you straight in the eye and say, I love your product, and then never use it. And so if you step back from the many books, from the thousands of research papers, you can think about behavioral science as really doing three things. All of those research studies address three issues. First of all is that understanding. why people struggle, why there's a gap between intention and action, and why we sometimes do things that just don't make sense. Giving money to a gym that we never go to, right? Second, we have a set of tools that can help people do better. They can help people, well, actually go exercise, take that medication, or indeed use your product, open the email, whatever it might be. And that's the part that usually gets the most attention because it's really exciting, right? You see these nudges or interventions, these changes in a product or an environment that cause people to act differently. And I do mean cause because we measure it very rigorously. But the part that's most important is actually the third part, which is we are committed to testing in the field. We know that one person's different than another. While Emiliano and I are very similar in many ways, we may not respond to the same behavioral intervention. We may not respond to the same product or application. Or your users in one area of the country may respond differently than another. And that means we just have to be humble and we have to test. We have to see, is this really working? Is this helping drive results in a particular circumstance? And that generally we use randomized control trials or formal experiments to do this. Altogether, that creates a unique and powerful package. We work very often with designers who have a particular understanding of the mind and the tools, but generally don't use the rigorous testing. We work with product managers who might do the testing, but they don't have the same understanding. Behavioral science brings all three of these together in one tremendously powerful package to help your users do better in your application and in their daily lives. Now, what we see is that companies around the world are doing this now. It is amazing. From even 10 years ago, it was basically the US, the UK, and Australia. Now, over 80 countries were part of our study that Emiliano was mentioning. We do have some gaps in Africa, and that's starting to grow. But basically everywhere else, actually there have been a few new ones in Argentina and in Uruguay and Paraguay, etc., that aren't even on this map because they're so new. But we're seeing it all around the world. And let me tell you kind of what that looks like. We're seeing big companies like Uber, who had a behavioral science team that looked at driving behavior and how people would get frustrated waiting on their apps for a driver. We see companies in Mexico, for example, helping people save. This is Sura, helping people save for the future. We see tiny nonprofits, tiny organizations who are, in this case, this is one helping mothers at risk of homelessness get jobs, take care of their young children, etc. We see groups like System 1, big marketing consultancies that help companies promote their beer, promote their shoes, promote whatever it might be. We see groups like IMEC, Instituto Mexicano de Economía del Comportamiento, that looks at how to apply. Sorry, Emiliano, I know I got the last word wrong. I tried, buddy. As I said, it would be funny if I spoke in English, but just not very useful to anybody. So we see wonderful applications in human resources, in helping employees engage, be productive at work. And we see a tremendous number of policy organizations around the world. So governments applying these techniques. And this is just one of many, many examples from the UK. So behavioral science is this understanding of the mind and a set of tools to help people when they don't do things that make sense, when they do things that don't make sense. Now I want to talk about that blueprint. If there are any questions, I am watching the chat window. Please feel free to ask along the way. How is my speed? How am I doing in terms of, is that all right? Okay, cool. Or at least it's humorous. One of the two, it's hard to tell. All right, so as you write up questions, please feel free again to write in the chat window. But let me talk about this blueprint. So through the book, through the survey, I talked to so many different teams around the world. And what we found is that we're all doing some very similar things. We call it different names. For Walmart, for example, their behavioral science team, led by Ming, they call it the 4Ds. Discover, design, test, decide, determine, and then decide at the end. Ideas 42 has a similar process. They use 5 steps. The IRS, the revenue service of the US has one. The IMEC has a similar process. Clover Health. So many different great organizations have come down to the same thing. And it's a type of behavioral problem solving. So I synthesize that and I use the acronym DECIDE, which is define the problem, explore the context, craft the intervention. What is it you do to help the person take action? Actually build it into a product, implement, then determine the impact, did it work or not, and then figure out what's next, because often we go in an iterative cycle. This acronym can be useful for you if you're not familiar, but it itself isn't anything special. It's a way of, as I said, synthesizing what so many of us are doing all around the world. What's really powerful are the tools we use along that path. And so today I want to walk you through some of those tools. What it means to identify the hypothesis, your understanding of how you're going to change behavior, how we look at the tiny actions that someone that might cause somebody trouble, and then how we diagnose the specific problem and come up with an intervention to help solve that. Now, I'm only going to have time to talk about some of these tools that we have in the field. So we have a free guide in both English and in Spanish on designing for behavior change, how you actually do this, and it walks through the DECIDE process. It's free. It's available at the site behavioraltechnology.co. Now, right now, it has the English version, but I'll send everybody who signs up today, I'll send you the Spanish version as well. Or there's a little place you can comment and just ask for the Spanish version, and I'll send you that as well. Okay. So again, I'll give you a taste of these, a taste of the different tools, but you can also go to behavioraltechnology.co to get the more detailed, full version of these exercises. Okay. Okay. Great. So I like to use real examples. So let's say that you have been asked, that you're working in an application company, and you've been asked to build an app. Say it's an iPhone app that helps people get off the couch and go exercise. Okay? And to make it concrete, let's say you work with, it's a B2B sale. I know I get many questions about B2B behavior change. And the employee gets this for free. Their company buys it for them, okay? And so your job is to help them get up and exercise. Well, of course, in product management and design, we have many ways of expressing the requirements. What platform are we using? What's our time frame? What are the resources we have, etc. What we need in particular here is an understanding of the behavioral problem. And so in addition to that normal design brief or project functional requirements, we want to look at three things. The actor, the person you're working with, in this case, the guy sitting on the couch. We want to look at what you're asking them to do. Get up and go to the gym. And then why all of this matters. Now, for some people, exercise might be losing weight. For others, it might be joint pain. So in fact, this is actually an example that I have. So for a long time, I've had joint pain, back pain, etc. And exercise is a great solution. And so, I speak from my own experience. We all struggle with behavior change at times. And so you can frame these three ideas, the actor, the action, and the outcome, as a hypothesis, which is your statement of how you think this will help people, what you want to do. So let's say you target white-collar workers, which are professional workers, perhaps sitting in a computer a long time. And you think that by going to the gym, that will cause them to go to the doctor less often, right? But at this point, that's all it is. It's a guess. It's what we want the world to look like. But of course, that isn't necessarily the case. So there are a number of tools in the guide that walk through how to come up with additional ideas, additional hypotheses, how to evaluate those. I'm just going to assume that you've settled on that one, that that's the particular problem you're trying to solve. So that problem is all about you and what your company wants to accomplish. Now we need to understand what's real in the person's life. This thing that you want to do, is it something that would ever make sense to them? Is it something they want to do? That's exploring the context. That is a mix of qualitative and quantitative research. And if you're a designer, we want to do a version of what's known as a journey map, okay? But it has a particular behavioral slant to it. What we want to do is we want to map out each of the small actions that a person has to take before they go from where they are right now to success. In this case, going to the gym and exercising. So let's think, what might those be? If we're looking at this app you've developed that helps people go exercise. Well, they had to have gotten the email. They had to have opened the email. They had to have downloaded the application, right? Your app that you've developed. Well, they're probably not going to download it in the moment they're going to go to the gym. So later on, they have to remember, they have to think about your app while they're sitting there watching Netflix, watching Amazon Prime, whatever it is, right? Watching some great program, whatever it is. So they have to think about it. Then they're like, wow, they have to have time to do it right then. They have to have the gym clothes that are clean, which can be a problem for some of us. They have to know where the gym is. Maybe they have to have membership. Maybe they have to have a car or a bus, or they have to have the time. In other words, this simple thing, go to the gym. My application helps people go to the gym, is actually tremendously complicated. And that is one of the first key lessons. That what we assume, what we just imagine as a simple, straightforward process, our minds hide the complexity that's really there. It hides it because we're too close, because we're the people who build the product. And we need tools to help us break out of our mental blindness. That's what this is, where you write out step by step by step the checklist for, oh yeah, man, okay, well, there's this thing they have to do, this thing they have to do, etc. And what I find in working with companies is almost always people say, wow, there's a lot that people need to do that I never thought about. That's number one. Then, as you've looked through that list, well, some of them might be a problem and some of them might not. Behavior change never occurs in general. It's not like, hey, you develop an app and suddenly people go exercise. Instead, it's one of those individual steps that's stopping people. And if your product helps address the place they're stopping, great. If it doesn't, it'll have no effect. Now we think about the obstacles that people can face in terms of these, in terms of this acronym CREATE. Okay, and I know iMac has a Spanish version of this as well, which is quite cool, and I actually adapted it and made it better from my version as well. So CREATE is what's required for someone to take action. Let's think about one of those small steps. Let's say the step is opening up the app, right, and saying, okay, do I want to go to the gym? Okay. Well, first problem is, why are they going to think about your app in the first place? Something needs to cue them. It needs to get their attention. And again, those of us who build products, this is often the biggest problem because we think our product's great. They're going to be thinking about it. But in the lives of our users, they have so many different things trying to capture their attention. Our product is a tiny piece of their lives. And so what we assume, attention, that they care about it, etc., right, that they're thinking about it, not the case. And we have to find, how do we actually get their attention? Now, once you get somebody's attention, then they'll have an emotional or intuitive reaction, a feeling to it. So for the person opening the app, it might be, yeah, I know I need to exercise, but I just look terrible in my gym clothes. And they won't go. That's an emotional reaction that has absolutely nothing to do with whether exercise is a good thing or not, right? Or whenever I go to the gym, I feel judged. I feel people looking at me and saying I'm not in shape. That's an emotional reaction. That happens in the mind faster than anything else. Once you get attention to it, that reaction happens. And we need to deal with that in its own way, because having a better value proposition doesn't help. Emotions trump value. And so if you can get past that, then we do have this sense of conscious cost-benefit evaluation. Now, the problem is it's not a spreadsheet. It's not math. Certain things are warped in our mind and how we think about costs and benefits. Losses feel more powerful than gains. Things that are near-term benefits feel more powerful than long-term benefits, etc. We'll talk about a bit of that. The rest of the funnel is ability, which is whether you actually have those gym shoes and whether you feel you can succeed, self-efficacy. Timing is, Do you procrastinate? Is it something urgent right now? And then experience is, did you have a bad experience in the past? Does that color your sense of the evaluation of the reaction? Does it burn you so you don't want to do this again? And so effectively what we do is we look at each of those steps and we use create as a checklist and say, okay, when they're opening the app, does it get their attention? What is their emotional reaction once they start thinking about it? What is their evaluation? We do that for every single one of the steps. For example, driving to the gym. Probably gonna have a queue because they're already thinking about it. Reaction, not a big deal, unless it's far away, unless there's a lot of traffic. And so you may lose people just because of traffic. We do this at every single step. And the result is a diagnosis. It's an understanding of how what we want to accomplish collides with their world, with how our goals to help them are going to fail. And it tells us where we can focus and where we can help our users do better. Sorry. So with that diagnosis in hand, there's a lot we can do. We understand what we want. We understand what's going on in their lives. We understand the intersection. Now we can find something that can actually help them. We can craft an intervention. And thankfully, behavioral science has a whole lot you can choose from. And we map them. I map them in the book and the guide to these core obstacles. If somebody has a problem of attention, there are techniques for that. If people are procrastinating, there are techniques for that. If people have a strong emotional negative reaction, there are techniques for that. And in fact, we have techniques both to help people start something, like go exercise, as well as how to stop, like stopping smoking, getting angry at your friends or family members, whatever those might be. And in many ways, they're the flip side of starting. They're adding frictions. They're making it harder to do these things, etc. I'm going to go through an example of starting, because that's often more concrete and immediate. But just know that we have those same techniques, and I talk about them in the workbook for stopping as well. So let's go through just a few concrete examples. So I'm sure all of you have sent an email before. We all have. Many of us have sent so many that we have lost count. But have we actually really thought about when we communicate with people? The answer is probably not, right? So this is a study that I ran with one of the largest employers in the world, and they have a large minimum wage population, okay? You might be able to guess what the company is, but I'll leave it there. And so this is a subset. We did a few dozen different versions, different times. And what we found is that we developed the same email, right? Please pay attention to our product, sign up for our product. We found the content didn't matter so much. Instead, what mattered was, were they busy? Did they have time to read our email? And in fact, we found that just by changing a few hours of when we sent it, and again, this is a subset of all the ones we did, these are some of the best ones. Even among the best, changing the time increased response rates by 50 to 70%. A huge impact on response and subsequent sign-up. Because so often when we have our products, when we have our marketing, we have our communications, we just want to yell at people. We want to get their attention. And the answer is usually we shouldn't get our users' attention at all. We should instead find where their attention is and go there. Or find when they have the bandwidth, find when they have time and space to think about it. Now, in this case, this was a minimum wage population, in many of them in the US, and they were working 2 jobs, 2 different shifts. The only time they had free when they weren't working was Saturday morning and Sunday evening. So that's why this worked. Did another test with a large manufacturing company, completely different result. Still very, very powerful. The time when you contact people is one of the most powerful factors you will ever use to change behavior, to increase engagement. But it's different. We have to have empathy for our users and understand the structure of their time. So let me give you an example of that emotional reaction in the moment. So one way that people struggle is you're asking them to do something new or strange to them. So the example on the right is from a company called OPower. Billion-dollar company, bought out by Oracle. They did one thing, primarily. They sent a letter to people telling them how much energy they were spending, which they already knew because they got a bill from their electric company. What they did differently was they compared that to their neighbors and said, you're spending this much money, your neighbors are spending this much money. And it got people so upset, so engaged, right? That they wanted to go beat their neighbors. It's a peer comparison, comparing other people. I ran a similar study, that's the one on the left, looking at how well people were saving and budgeting. Same thing, very powerful. Look, I have studied this stuff for over a decade. I get that mail, and it drives me crazy when I'm spending more than my neighbors. I understand exactly what they're doing. I've been doing this stuff for 10 years. Still works on me. It's just a very powerful technique. And so by the way, the references on the bottom are for the scientific studies that were used to measure the effect. Hunt Alcott was one of the early folks who studied O-power. He had about a 3% bump in energy usage, and it lasted over time. All these are also randomized control trials. So very formal scientific studies to determine the impact. And I'm happy to share any of the underlying resources if anybody cares. I just wanted to that was my little aside. Okay, so let's say we're talking about the evaluation side. Now, I should also mention, there are many, many different techniques. Here I just have a subset of them. I can only give a few right now. I want to make sure there's time to talk at the end. But again, you'll find a lot more in the guide and you'll find more in the book. So I'm just giving one example of each area. Okay, so evaluation. As product managers, as designers, as marketers, even as HR people, we often are really, really good at talking about why our product or why our service is wonderful. The problem is that actually what people care about, the part that we focus on? What we find is that, again, the mind is warped in how we think about costs and benefits. It's not a simple calculation. And so one of the key challenges is that things that you can get right now, benefits you get right now, well, they kind of crowd out everything else. You can't see the future. You just don't think about the future as much because you want that immediate gratification. And so that's human. We're never going to change that. We're not going to make people only focus on the future benefit, but you can be clever. And so this is a study by Katie Milkman at Wharton and others, which was actually in the context of going to the gym. And so what they did is they took something that people wanted right now. In this case, it was a newly released audiobook. When they did it, it was for the Hunger Games at the time, right? And people really wanted to get this book. It was wonderful. It was really highly rated. And so they took it and they locked it in the gym. They locked it in the lockers so that people could only get access to this audiobook. They could only listen to the Hunger Games when they were at the gym. And they stopped them from leaving with it. And so what they found is that by combining something that people did want to do, exercise, but they just didn't want to do it right now, with something that they really wanted to do right now, it significantly increased people's follow-through to go exercise. This is called temptation bundling. Mixing together something, bundling together something that is a near-term temptation, something I really want to do right now, with something that's longer term and important, but just not as tempting. Great technique. Dan Ariely talks about this in his first book in the context of some medication that he needed, which was very painful. And so he would watch these movies on his on TV to bundle those two together to help him get through this difficult experience. Here's a different study that my team ran, which is why sometimes that emotional reaction we can change, not by changing the emotion, but by helping people slow down. So I'm sure, at least in the US, we now, thankfully, we don't just take people's email or try to trick them into giving us their emails. Thankfully, it certainly was not the case before. But now we have to ask people, do you want this, right? And unless they say yes, we're not allowed to send them any email, right? Against the law. And so the problem is that so many companies have put together this little box that says, I would like to receive information. And your gut reaction, I know my gut reaction to that is, I don't want this. Whenever I see a little box that says, yes, I want information, I'm like, no way, I will never do that. I'm out of here. I'm not thinking about the company. I'm not thinking about what they want to tell me. I just say no immediately. That's an emotional reaction. And so what my team did was they avoided that emotional reaction. They changed it so it didn't look so familiar. And instead, as you can see on the left, they just made a drop-down, which was, hey, would you like our information? That's it. And then on the right-hand side, if they said yes, then they could, actually it should be if it says yes, then they could choose which information they wanted. We found a 500% increase in people signing up for that information. And these are people who sincerely wanted that information. This isn't tricking people. This is just slowing them down enough so they can think about, yeah, is this something I really want? And that's part of that evaluative process. Now, there are tremendous number of other techniques. I can't go through all of them. I'm not going to go through the ability, timing, experience. But again, those resources will be available to you. I instead wanted to jump to one final step, which again, I always try to talk about in these discussions, which is, okay, you're ready to build. You've decided that you're going to use a peer comparison, for example, right? You're going to show people how much other people are show the person on the couch, how much other people are exercising, and see if that helps him or her go to the gym. The question is that ethical? Is that the right thing to do? And it is only when we've chosen the interventions, when we understand the person's life through exploring the context, right? And have crafted the intervention that we can really effectively answer this question. And sadly, the answer is often no. And it's not an issue of behavioral science. It's an issue of product development, website design, marketing overall. So Herr Brynjol has put together a site that catalogs the many, many ways that companies trick users. You can look at them. There are funny names like Zuckering, after, of course, Mark Zuckerberg and the many tricks that Facebook uses, to a roach motel. You can go in, but you can't leave, and ways of different names for tricking people into revealing their private information, etc. Let me just give you a few of these examples. Google, as you may know, in Europe, there was a new law called GDPR, which was all about protecting people's privacy. So it applied to Google, so they just put a lot of people on trying to figure out how to trick people into agreeing to it nevertheless, without knowing what they were agreeing to. And so this consumer organization and later policymakers across Europe said they are tricking people and called out the behavioral techniques that were being used, right? There's tremendous good that our field can do, but we also see a lot of abuses. Let me show you a few more abuses very quickly. So Uber, for example, they studied how to push people to drive longer than they should. So they penalize them, for example, Uber and sadly other task companies, penalize their drivers for taking a bathroom break, for stopping so they can rest, because it makes them more money when people keep on going. It's just not safe, and it's not good for the driver. And this was particularly a behavioral study on how to do this. We see Facebook, of course, many examples. One of the earliest ones, right, before we realized Facebook was evil, was when they started to manipulate people's emotions for a study, just to see if they could do it, see what would happen. As an example of, there's an e-commerce company, ThredUp, that was recently called out for making up users and saying that these phantom users, these fake users, were buying clothes. They really love this. This one just went. It was all fake. They were just using social proof, a behavioral technique, in order to trick people. Now, this is not a behavioral science issue, and to be very clear. This is an issue of building products and communications and marketing and design. And the design community has thought about this in a deep way longer than behavioral science. It's because behavioral science is new. We're really just coming to terms with these issues. But I look to thoughtful designers for how they've handled this. This is an essay. This is part of an essay from Milton Glaser on the different gradations of how a design can go from really useful to hurting and potentially even killing a user, right? In this case, a car product, right? And so behavioral science isn't unique in facing this. We all do, right? Behavioral science is now being used in companies all around the world in different contexts, from manufacturing to fast food to consumer packaged goods to helping people exercise. What is unique is that there is a behavioral science of ethics. There's a study of in what situations we are ethical and when we aren't. It's not well known, but part of my job is to help spread that knowledge about this really powerful research. Dan Ariely's book, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, is a great place, as well as Experiments in Ethics, good places to start. But I'll give you the crib notes. You may have noticed that in those interventions I talked about before, we were effectively changing the context. We weren't fundamentally changing the person. We were instead changing when we emailed them. We were putting up a comparison to them to their neighbors, right? We give them different information, right? Or we change the form and how they interact with us. In the same way, we can change our context as researchers, as designers, as product managers. We can apply behavioral science to ourselves by using the same techniques, by using, for example, social proof. Emiliano just stood up to a client and said, no, this isn't the right thing to do. Wow, okay, I can take inspiration from that. We make commitments, like saying publicly, these are our standards, this is what we follow, which is a behavioral technique used for behavior change in other people, right? And then it raises the stakes. It makes it harder for us to break that commitment, etc. There's a tremendous power of applying behavioral science to ourselves to help us stay on the path that we want. Because in the end, I know you all are good people. My team is made up of good people. We suffer from the same temptations as anyone else. And so let's look at how we might look at our own intention-action gap, our intention to do good, and our actual action towards that. And that, more or less, is the talk. In short, in so many domains of our lives, in our lives and our users' lives, there's a gap between our intentions and our actions, what people want to do and what they actually do. Companies all around the world are applying behavioral science in order to address this problem, to make their products more effective, to make their marketing resonate in ethical ways, to drive the bottom line, as well as to help their users succeed. Across the world, we've come together. I synthesize this as the term decide, but there are lots of different frameworks out there. Mine is not unique. In the end, we're all doing a behavioral problem solving. We're understanding what we want, we're understanding the user's life, we're coming up with a solution, and then we're testing it in the field. That's what all of us are doing in the end. And thankfully, when it comes to those interventions, we've got a lot of great research, published, thoughtful, rigorous work that can help us try out some different tools to see what will work with a given set of users. But we always need to remember that we are just as human as anyone else. And we have an intention-action gap. In particular, when you are using behavioral science or any psychology in product design and marketing, we have to look at that ethical gap and how we can change our environment to help us do better and do good by our users. I've only had a chance to go through just a small subset of the vast world of applied behavioral science. There is, again, a workbook that will help you through this process, the exercises. It's a few pages of theory and then a whole lot of practice, a whole lot of practical techniques. It's available in both English and in Spanish. Please just send me a note if you'd like the Spanish version. Also, as I don't remember if Emiliano mentioned at the beginning, we'll have a version of this talk also available with Spanish subtitles, because that can help make it more accessible to folks. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I'll look through the questions. I know Emiliano wanted to do a little back and forth as well. So thank you so much. And please feel free to type in additional questions you might have. Spanish is fine, English is fine, whatever you like. Okay, great. So Emiliano.
Thank you very much for this talk. As always, you're very on point with your talks. Thank you very much. And as you said, like, we want to invite anyone that has any questions to post them on the chat of the webinar. And also, I also want to ask you some things, Steve, because I know you're launching the second version of your book. So I want to talk about it. I mean, I've read your first book. I think the first book is really good book. I mean, as any book that was written more than 5 years ago, I mean, it's a very different field from
Oh, yeah.
where you wrote this to what it's now. So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, if someone already read the book, what can you expect? I mean, what are you gonna find in this second version of the book?
Sure. So I took about 40% of the book and I just threw it out. I'm like, look, we don't need this part. There are other people who are covering this now. I don't need to talk about it, right? And that's a lot on the product management side. It's a lot on kind of integrating this with an Agile process. And a lot of people said, hey, we already know Agile. We can figure that out. I then changed another 40% quite radically. So decide, for example, is completely new because I've had the joy of learning so much from other people in the field over the last 6-7 years, right? And I'm doing it differently. And so decide is a new synthesis of BJ Fogg's method, right? Of Ideas 42, of Walmart's method, of all these different groups. This is the summary, right, of that. And so that's different. And then I didn't change about 20%. So most of it is quite strongly changed. I think about it as first added a whole new section on ethics, right? Because I discovered this behavioral science of ethics myself. And like, wow, I need this too, right? So that section's new. The survey. So I only talked a little bit about it here. You mentioned some in the beginning, right? But this survey of teams all around the world, where the jobs are, right? How you get into the field, what you need on your team, that's all completely new, right? As well as I built out the section on experiments and how to make it easier in the process. But all throughout, I've got a new section on data science and behavioral science and how the two intersect. So in many ways, it's a new book. I really love writing. And so this was an excuse for me to go write another book.
Great. I mean, just as a brief commercial en Spanish, ¿no? Si alguien está interesado en adquirir el libro, ¿no? Yo se lo recomiendo mucho, ya lo pueden conseguir en Kindle. En Kindle ya está disponible. Ahí están los links para que lo puedan adquirir. La versión física no la pueden pedir todavía, está en preventa, ¿no? Pero si les interesa tener la versión física, en este link pueden ustedes hacer la orden. Si no, les digo, yo lo tengo en Kindle y la verdad es que, pues si les interesa, es una excelente versión. Además, la versión en Kindle tiene, digamos, algunas funcionalidades bastante lindas, ¿no? So, just a small, brief commercial on the book, if anyone is interested.
Oh, I understood. Yeah, great, thank you. Very kind.
Also, I wanted to ask you about a special section, the third section. I mean, yeah. I think it's a section that there's not any other book in the world that goes on behavioral science that touches that. I mean, it's about how do you build a group inside your organization, right? So what can you tell us about that? I mean, what can a business expect when creating or looking to create a behavioral science unit inside the company?
Sure. So, well, I do have to disagree about one point. So there are a few other people who've written about starting a team. I can't claim uniqueness here. So I really like Matt Wallert's book, Start from the End. So he was the CBO at Clover Health, right? And he was previously at Microsoft. His is good. And then the World Bank has come out with some, they have a behavioral group that's come out with some good material. But there is a lot of unique here because of this survey, the broadest, most comprehensive survey in the world of behavioral science teams. So not completely unique, but yeah, there are some good things there. Yeah, so primarily as a company, you think about it as most companies don't care about behavioral science, and they shouldn't. Instead, they care about their business and what they're trying to accomplish for their users, right? For their clients. And what we find is behavioral science and building a team like this is tremendously powerful in product development and design, in your data science and analytics groups, and in marketing and communications. Those are the three big areas we're seeing around the world companies applying behavioral science. Again, not because of behavioral science itself, but because of the power. Because in a single test that cost us a few dollars, we increased our opt-in rate by 500%. That's why it matters, is the outcomes, right? And so those are the three big areas. A few companies are also using it in human resources, like, for example, your work, right? Which is very cool and exciting, and that's kind of one of the new growth areas, but it's still smaller than marketing, product, and analytics. what you should look for is often, you don't need a PhD. I have a PhD, let me tell you, you don't need it. What you need instead is somebody who both knows the field well. So if you're doing marketing, you need somebody who has a good marketing background. If you're doing product design, you need somebody who has a good product design background, right? And then has the rigor and the skepticism. As I mentioned in the beginning, the most important thing of behavioral science is not reading Nudge, right? Reading some of these books. It's knowing how to run an experiment and how to think critically about human behavior. That's what you look for. And thankfully, there are a lot of those people out there. There are, I would say, from our estimation, there are many more people who have these skills now than their currently jobs. So if you want to start a team, you're in a great place. And I should say also that we've seen it flowering in Latin America over just the last few years. Just the last few years, Central and Latin America. And I'm really excited about that myself.
Yes, that's exactly why I wanted to talk about the chapter, because I think it's something that's very relevant for the Latin America area. So if anyone out there is interested in building or strengthening a group that's focused on behavioral design, you will find a lot of information in the third section of the book. No?
You'll find some in the third section, but the main place you should go is IMEC's website. So I actually mentioned this in the book repeatedly. I don't know if you know that, but the best place I have found in the world to find Spanish language resources on applied behavioral science is IMEC's website, right? And they've translated a variety of works. They've done a great job. They have videos. They talk about the different programs out there. It's awesome. So check out IMEC's website.
Thank you, Steve. Also, just continuing about the talk we were having, you mentioned something I like it a lot in the preface. You talk about spreading the talk on voluntary behavior change.
Sorry, I missed that. One more time.
Sorry?
I missed that. Could you say that again?
In the preface, you talk about voluntary behavior change, about spreading the talk about voluntary behavior change. And I think that's really important. I mean, we talked about ethics during this talk, but people generally see behavior change as a general thing. And, you know, putting this difference between what's voluntary behavior change and what's non-voluntary behavior change, I think it's really important towards, you know, integrating ethics to all this. So what can you say to someone that's, you know, thinking about or using currently behavioral science to go the other way, just to promote non-voluntary behavior change, maybe not in a bad way, but as you said, like just for the sake of, you know, temptation. I want to have a better result, so I might increase the pressure on the users.
Yeah, it's so natural for a company to think about what they want to accomplish. It's okay, I don't judge that, right? Companies want their users to do X, they want them to do Y. The challenge is, that's just not as effective as thinking about what the user wants. It's not effective in the short term, because thankfully coercing people is hard, right? And it's not effective in the long term, because how do you grow your business? Through referrals, through repeat business, through people being interested. It's only in the narrowest type of transactional situation is trying to trick somebody actually beneficial to a company. If we look at it in the long view, it's far better for the company, it's far better for the individual. And so that's why we use these techniques. It's not because we're bad people. It's not because we want to hurt our users. It's rather, I've talked to so many people in the industry who are just like, okay, this is my job. This is the thing I need to do. And it's hard to step out of that role for a second and say, okay, there are actually a variety of things I want to do. Which one of these really connect with my user? Because those are the ones that are going to succeed. So that's how I think about it. And we also, we had a couple questions come in. So if I can answer a few of those. I know you had a few more, Emiliano, but I just wanted to respond to these. So la versión en español del documento, no problem. So we will send it out to you, Laura. And again, you'll see it both on the, I don't have your email address here, so if you can just send it to Emiliano, or you can fill out the form on my website, behavioraltechnology.co, and I'll be happy to send it over to you, no problem. And then here's one from Gloria, which is, which market has the greatest opportunity when talking about behavioral design? That is a wonderful question. I can say it's probably not the US, it's probably not the UK, but just about everywhere else. We see the starting all around the world. There's a great group in Kenya, right? There's a wonderful cluster in South Africa, right? As I mentioned, there was a lawyer in Paraguay who was starting up the first team last year, right? So we have examples, but the space to grow is immense. And so if you're working in a particular market, feel free to send me a message. I can look through the directory and see what other groups you might want to connect with and learn from, or talk to Emiliano, talk to the team, because again, they have got the greatest resources out there if you're in the Spanish-speaking world. Other questions? Emiliano, anything else you wanted to talk about?
No.
Okay.
The audience has any questions? No?
Well, I think we are just at time. So I like to honor people's time where I can and thank everyone. I hope this was useful for you. I hope this gives you a sense of the tremendous power and just awesomeness of this field and what we can do to help our users in their daily lives, to better use our products, to better succeed at what they want to do. And I hope I've also talked a little bit about the challenges, where we have to learn, where we still have more to do. If you do check out the workbook, if you buy the book as well, I'm happy, but the workbook will get you a lot of what you need as well. We don't currently have a Spanish version of the book. We are actually looking for a partner if somebody wants to do the Spanish language side of the full book as well. So thank you so much. And thank you, Emiliano. Thank you, Diana. Thank you guys for organizing this.
No, thank you, Steve. And just to close, I'd like to invite everyone to the ADN. I'm just going to do this in Spanish.
Please, yes.
Remark. Entonces, nada más, digamos, muchas gracias por unirse a la plática. Les digo, Steve es una persona que sabe mucho de estos temas. Es una de las personas que ha estado siempre más enfocada en la práctica. Entonces, siempre es muy rico escucharlo. Espero que les haya servido, ¿no? Como mencionamos al inicio del grupo, si quieren seguir conectados con los eventos de Action Design, si quieren seguir conectados con eventos alrededor de las ciencias del comportamiento, tomen una foto a este código QR que está en la pantalla, los va a llevar a un grupo de Meetup. Digamos que en ese grupo de Meetup nosotros estamos subiendo o vamos a ir subiendo ahí el próximo evento y así sucesivamente por si les interesa pues entrar en la comunidad. Espero que pronto nos podamos ver y digamos tener algún evento un poquito presencial como originalmente estaba pensado todo esto. Los otros recursos que están disponibles, les digo, se los recomiendo mucho. El podcast es uno de los podcasts, digamos, de ciencias del comportamiento más interesantes. Tienen acceso a personas de primer nivel, entonces se los recomiendo mucho. La bolsa de trabajo, como les mencionaba, ahorita yo sé que muchas personas buscan trabajo en este tipo de disciplinas. La bolsa de trabajo de ADN es un camino para que se empiecen a dar cuenta, digamos, qué tipo de trabajos hay, dónde se está moviendo la demanda por esto. Y, como les decía también, si les interesa ver qué otros grupos, si están en Perú, si están en Colombia, si están en Chile, si están en algún otro de los países de Latinoamérica que se registraron para el webinar, en el directorio de equipos probablemente puedan ustedes encontrar si hay algún equipo ya trabajando en su país o si, digamos, hay algún grupo cercano con quien puedan también entrar en contacto. Entonces, les digo, realmente el ADN es un recurso muy rico, se lo recomiendo mucho, ¿no?
Thank you. And there were just a few more questions that came in. Folks, if you could send me a message on the site, that would be great. Go to Behavioral Technology. I can't actually copy your email address from here. So if you wouldn't mind just sending me through the through behavioraltechnology.co, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
We will send you, everyone. Les vamos a mandar la grabación de esto. Como dice Steve, se los vamos a subtitular por si quieren también invitar a alguna otra persona que quiera escuchar sobre lo que platicamos. Bueno, con los subtítulos se va a hacer un poquito más accesible. Y pues les recomiendo mucho que sí entren al sitio de Behavioral Technology. Ahí van a encontrar muchas cosas muy ricas. De todos modos, les vamos a mandar un correo donde va a estar la liga a la página de Steve para que puedan acceder, puedan ver los manuales, los manuales que tiene, puedan conocer, digamos, un poquito más de su trabajo. Y si les interesa, échenle un mensaje. Steve es una persona muy accesible. Entonces, bueno.
Gracias. Buenas tardes.
Thank you very much, Steve, for everything. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.